is thanks to all of you for getting the word out. Thank you so much. Yay. We also want to thank our sponsors who help us keep these events free and with food so that everyone in a company can attend, not just the C-levels getting to go to big conferences. This is the same kind of quality education that you would get there. And so we appreciate our panelists coming out tonight, and we appreciate our sponsors. So here's just a quick agenda. We're going to try to keep announcements to a minimum because we are jam-packed, and we have some of the rock stars of the industry here tonight, which is great. And we've been requested by Pillsbury to empty the premises by 9 p.m., so please try to be mindful of that. And if we come and try to herd you out, don't leave. Okay, our event schedule next month is going to be at Stanford Medical School, exact location TBD. No meeting in November. We're going to have our Mingle Jingle in December, and we are still looking for a location for the 1.5-day conference in January. So if any of you have space at your companies and would like to host a group of awesome people for a day and a half, please call me maybe. That would be great. And announcements. We have a couple folks that wanted to make announcements. Please speak up.
I just wanted to say, go for it. Yeah, I just wanted to say I've been uploading. I have most of the videos ready to upload. I've uploaded a couple for the past events this year. So it's basically the channel's called on YouTube. It's called Health Tech Forum, all one word. Health Tech Forum, all one word for the YouTube channel. Yeah. So it should come up if you do that search. So enjoy. It's not Steven Spielberg quality, but you know.
Greatest mix medley.
Yeah. So, but it does the job. So check it out.
Excellent. Okay. Anyone else in the back?
I was just going to say, if you can post the link to those videos on the meetup site, that would be much easier to find them.
Yep, can do, thanks.
What was that hashtag?
Oh, SBHTF. We get why personalized medicine is a big deal. This is one of my favorite statistics, and it's courtesy of Steve Burrill and the Personalized Medicine Coalition. And it's funny, personalized medicine was on the cover of the New York Times yesterday, and my finance guy, non-scientist husband, comes running to me, you know, really excited. Hey, honey, personalized medicine is on the cover. It must be a really big thing now. Yeah, honey, it's kind of a big deal. So I think one of the things I want to be mindful of tonight in the panels and presentations, we all get why this is so important. We understand that there are significant regulatory, reimbursement, and clinical adoption hurdles. But one of the biggest challenges that the industry is going to have is actually educating people who don't really understand it and why it's so important and why we need to keep pushing. So please be mindful of that, and let's all try to help advocate for this very exciting industry. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jim Vaughn. We are not going to introduce people as they come up for their presentations. All of you should have bios on your chairs. If you didn't get one, just raise your hand and we'll have somebody get to you in the back.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Rhonda. You know, I'm going to tend to be a loud speaker, so let me know if you can hear me in the back and whether or not I need to use the mic. Are you okay? Can you hear okay? Perfect. Well, let me just do a quick opening and a quick thank you for coming this evening and getting a chance to have a discussion with myself and, of course, the other panel members. I look forward to any open Q&A that you guys might have. I work with Genomic Health. We're headquartered in Redwood City, and we're, gosh, I guess we've been in this space since initially the company starting back in 2000 and really launching our first product in 2004 in breast cancer. So what I hope to do tonight is just share with you a couple of slides of kind of where we are currently in the space, what we see coming in the future for the upcoming years, and where our focus is from both the research area of the business as well as where we are going to move commercially in terms of our business model. So with that said, as I get these slides to go, we always have a safe harbor statement, of course, highlighting the fact that what we're going to be discussing and sharing is confidential, but also open to comment. So anyway, not unlike the first slide Rhonda mentioned or showed, you know, it's amazing what's happening in this space. And with our focus in the cancer market, there's a huge opportunity both in the US and ex-US, with over 570,000 patients, you know, who are going to die from their disease. But what's amazing, at least in the cancer space also, is that we have over $60 billion which are being spent on cancer therapies with an average efficacy of about 25% response, which is amazing, the number of people who are getting treatments who clearly don't benefit in the majority of cases, but of course with it being such an emotionally challenging disease as well as a critical disease with such an important outcome, that people really want to know and understand exactly what kind of treatment will work best for them. And so therefore the level of evidence you're going to have to do to be able to convince someone of looking at alternatives to a traditional measure of treatment is really quite high. And the data-driven medical oncology audience is really witness to that. And so I think it's really driven our approach both from a scientific perspective, clinical perspective, continued work on the data side, but then also on the patient side to help really educate patients about their own disease and a little bit more about what's happening and the kinds of questions that they can ask themselves, as well as challenge their caregivers. Our initial product was really focused in breast cancer, and we've continued to build that out with various indications or various uses within the breast cancer arena. And at least in our early node-negative business, over 100,000 patients are diagnosed, of which the majority received chemotherapy. And when we started this back in 2004, something like over 80% of patients received chemotherapy. And so we are making a real impact over the course of the last several years in terms of reducing and really tailoring medications, or really treatment choices, if we would, for patients. The amazing thing is that just about 4% of patients really benefit in that area of node-negative disease with chemotherapy. So even though Genomic Health, I think, has made an incredible impact, particularly in breast cancer, we still have a huge amount of room to grow, and we have new products that can still make things even better than what we have today. So even though we have made a huge step forward, we also see that there's great opportunity, and so thus you'll see a little bit more about our continued effort and research associated with next generation type of products. And I think the thing that I love most about working with the folks at Genomic Health is not only the scientific rigor, but also the focus on patient and the focus on what we can do to really help those patients better understand what treatment works best for them. And so I think keeping that focus both in our company and throughout our various work is really pivotal to our efforts and our success. As we look at this revolution, I should say, in cancer care, as I mentioned, you're probably familiar with what we've done in terms of invasive breast cancer and the initial launch there, with continued studies showing predictive benefit beyond just the prognostic benefit in breast cancer. Also recently, and just in the past year, launching DCIS, ductal carcinoma in situ for breast cancer, that question being more focused on radiation benefit and whether or not, you know, patients are really going to get any advanced or any beneficial outcomes and treatments associated with that. In addition to that, of course, we've launched also in colon cancer stage 2, and then just recently in June of this year we launched stage 3 colon cancer as well. So we continue to do further work and research in that arena. For those of you that might be following our efforts in the area of prostate cancer, we did just announce a few weeks ago positive data associated with our first validation study in prostate cancer. And so that data is going to be shared early in 2013 at a research meeting. So you'll be seeing and hearing more about what we're doing in the area of prostate cancer as well. Just a couple quick highlights to tell you where we are as a company. You know, we've really expanded our efforts on the international side. We've had great success, I think, in the US on the breast cancer arena. And now with the launching of products in colon and next year into prostate, we've also been moving into the major markets in Europe, in Canada, Latin America. And we've done this in a variety of ways, both with partners, working with venture groups to make the product available and provide access for patients, but then also through the our own efforts and our own hiring out and building out of our own commercial organization into major markets in which we're working with the UK, for example, to gain support from NICE in France, Germany, and Italy and Spain. So you continue to see, if you track our business, expanding growth, if you would, in those markets outside the US. If you look at our total revenue as a business, you know, unlike I think for myself and others who've often worked in pharma, when you launch a product and you've had such high penetration rates, you often have these billion-dollar type products. And yet in the diagnostic space, I think we've done a really tremendous job in terms of making, you know, personalized medicine come to life for invasive breast cancer patients. And yet this year, I think we've done quite well, and we continue to grow our business. And at this point, we're going to be close to $250 million in revenue in 2012. So you can see that continued growth over the last handful of years. And you can see also the various product makeup in terms of what portions are coming out of breast as well as our colon business. Quite frankly, the vast majority of our efforts over the handful of years we've been in business have really been focused on taking those profits or those revenues and putting them back into research and putting them back into new technologies and additional clinical work. And it was only in 2010 that we began to show some profitability. And you can see even now with our continued growth, we see this space that yes, we're profitable, we're self-sustaining, but at the same time, we continue to see such opportunities in various cancer tumor types, in addition to new technologies like next-generation sequencing, to be able to even improve upon what we are already offering our patients and clinicians, that we can't help but continue to invest in what we see as a big opportunity. And I think the financial markets have seen that, and they're happy to see us cash flow positive, yet at the same time, they've been supportive of our investment back into the business and into the pipeline. With regards to our breast cancer product, even though we're over 60% penetrated in the US in terms of newly diagnosed patients who have invasive breast cancer, we still see quite a bit of growth opportunity, particularly within certain states. You can see this below, that California, as progressive as we are in so many ways, is not necessarily the most highly penetrated markets. And so you'll see that in the Northeast, the Upper Midwest, and the Southwest tend to be some of our more highly concentrated areas. You might be familiar with some of the research we've also done on the national level with the National Cancer Institute, in which we've kicked off, you know, a couple of pivotal trials. The first really in that of node-negative invasive breast cancer with TAILORx, and that trial was over 11,000 patients. And that trial was completed in 2010, and we're expecting to see the outcomes from that data as early as 2015. So it's going to be it's the largest breast cancer study ever done and completed, and it's just going to be an incredible amount of data. And one of the key issues, or one of the key benefits that the NCI had, was when they kicked off this study, is they allowed up to 6 different chemotherapy regimens to be used in those patients who had a higher recurrence score, and they've collected all the blocks. So they actually are holding all the tumor tissue blocks so that they'll have outcomes associated with the individual treatments, and people will be able to, again, continue to look at new and better approaches to personalized medicine using the cancer tissue that are in these blocks. They kicked off in 2011 a node-positive study in breast cancer. Again, a very large study, again utilizing Oncotype DX with over 9,000 patients. And so that is up and running in the majority of our SWOG studies, and it's also included in a couple countries outside the US as well. So we look forward to getting some results there in probably a handful of years after that of the TAILORx study. The DCIS score is a new product that was kicked off at the first of this year, and again, it's focused on really a question of radiation benefit and or treatment. So while our first validation study is out there, we're going to continue to do further studies with groups in various countries as well as in the US to provide more and more information and data around radiation and the potential benefit in saving that for women who otherwise are going to be treated, 5 days a week for a cycle of 6 cycles and have all kinds of, you know, post-treatment burns and even physical movement limitations, that if they don't benefit from it, we can certainly save them that sort of pain and that sort of energy. You know, with just a couple minutes left in highlighting this, I did want to touch base on our prostate cancer efforts and what we see there. And in the prostate cancer market, you know, over 250,000 men are diagnosed every year, and yet the vast majority of it, even through normal pathology, is recognized as being relatively low risk. But people don't know, you know, whether they're the one who has an aggressive prostate cancer that can prevent them from, you know, impact their life and impact their survival. And so what we see is we see a vast majority of people taking on some very aggressive surgeries. And those surgeries result in not only incontinence but impotency, and for what turns out to be about a 3% risk of progression of death or disease. So the question is how can we better identify through core needle biopsy whether or not that's really a naughty or nice kind of prostate cancer, to be able to help men make better choices around their clinical treatment along with their physicians or their surgeons. So the key question being really is, do I have clinically significant disease? And so one of the hurdles we're seeing is that just the education level associated with it, and the willingness for men to even ask the question and not just immediately want to take action and move forward with surgery. So again, it'll be a new market for us and focusing on the urologist instead of the medical oncologist with the prostate cancer, but nonetheless it's going to be an exciting and new area for us in 2013. When we take a look at the worldwide opportunity for the markets that we're focused in breast cancer, colon, and prostate, we see in excess of a $3 billion opportunity, and it's really a function of getting the education out there along with making the service and the process readily available for access for those patients and those payers in order to make it available. I mentioned earlier about next generation sequencing. This is a new scientific platform that we're involved in, and really it's been amazing, I think, how this field has moved in terms of being able to identify more and more human genome sequencing in smaller and smaller amounts of tissue. And so what we see is a challenge is really the bioinformatics side of combining what we can learn from the molecular biology through these new platforms and translate it into clinical outcomes. Because while there's incredible kinds of cancer panels that are coming out from a lot of companies and with great research, we need to tie them to an actual outcome for people to have the confidence to either accept a change in therapy from what is standard, or to consider not having additional therapy based upon the genomic information we have. So again, I think it's, as you know, a very complicated arena, but one in which I think that the reward for patients and for physicians is very much real. So this just highlights, I think, our 2012 milestones, focusing on both strengthening our financial position so that we can and continue to sustain ourselves as an independent company, invest in global commercial capability. We're seeing continued investment ex-US in terms of both clinical research, decision impact studies to help highlight and show the benefit of these types of opportunities, as well as what we're seeing in the third area, which is our continued research into development and platform technologies. So with that, I'm going to end it and hand it over to the next speaker.
Okay, I've been talking too much all day, so I can't possibly match Jim's voice, so I'm going to go ahead and use the microphone. Okay. Do we have...
Yes. Look on the top right if you get that exit mic. Get ready to
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Not only does he do genomics and oncology, but also okay, you can tell I'm a total Apple person now. I can't even find it. Thank you. Right, here it is, not on the left side. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jim. You know, having had a mother with breast cancer and a father who had prostate cancer, I'm always struck by the work that you folks are doing at Genomic Health, and anything that can be provided to help patients make better decisions about treatments when the number of treatment options is so overwhelming at a time that you're diagnosed with cancer. It's really good work that you folks are doing, so thank you. I think you'll hear here's some interesting parallels between what Jim talked about and what I'm going to talk about in a different therapeutic area. Sorry, that wasn't because of my parents. I'm for some reason. Okay, focus on the left eye. I'm going to focus on a different therapeutic area, and that is coronary artery disease. And I think you're going to find some interesting parallels in terms of not only the benefits of personalized medicine, but also the need for greater efficiency of care. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our test, CORIS-CAD, which is the only blood test that's currently available that can safely and quickly identify patients who are unlikely to have obstructive coronary artery disease. So essentially what CORIS-CAD is a rule-out test. It's really designed to rule patients out of unnecessary cardiac workups, which take time, have safety implications, and are certainly quite costly. The patients that we're talking about here are not the patients who are going into the emergency department with crushing chest pain and saying, I think I'm having a heart attack. These are symptomatic patients, but they're stable symptomatic patients, and they're usually showing up in the primary care physician's office. And just a quick primer on coronary artery disease, essentially it's an obstruction in the coronary arteries, which are those that are carrying blood to the heart. So those are important, and so as you would expect, physicians work carefully to make sure that they're working patients up quickly if they are folks that they think might be suffering from coronary artery disease. So what happens today? Well, generally what will happen is a patient will go into the primary care physician's office. To give you an idea, the patients that we're talking about go in and see a physician 10,000 times every day. So there are an awful lot of patients, and that will connect to, when I give you an idea of some dollars, some of the overutilization of some of the diagnostic tests that goes on in this therapeutic area. So a patient will go into the primary care physician. The physician will generally work that patient up, try to understand what other clinical factors are going on to determine, is it likely coronary artery disease, or gastrointestinal, or musculoskeletal, or anxiety, or what have you. The primary care physician might also do some early non-invasive tests in his or her office, an exercise treadmill test or a stress test. Those tests are not terribly helpful, however, at determining whether someone does or does not have coronary artery disease. And so more often than not, those patients will then be referred over to the cardiologist. And one of the first treatments that a cardiologist will do is what's called an MPI, or myocardial perfusion imaging, also known as a nuclear stress test. And essentially, this is radiation that's used to actually take a look at the coronary arteries and see how is blood flowing. Are we seeing an obstruction? If the MPI is positive, or if it's indeterminate, generally patients will then be sent on to a coronary angiography. And this is really considered the gold standard test in determining whether somebody has coronary artery disease or not. And essentially a catheter is put into the coronary arteries to actually take a look at the plaque buildup and determine whether there is an obstruction or not. And in the case that there is, that's when usually a stent will be placed to essentially prop open that coronary artery. So the whole angiography space got some press about a month and a half ago now, I guess, when there was a New York Times piece that was published about an investigation in an HCA hospital, and found that there were a number of these angiography procedures that were being done with no apparent clinical rationale for them. These are expensive procedures. Angiography generally will run at least $10,000, and so certainly there's been a little bit of concern about is this an effort really to try to help diagnose patients, or is it really about driving revenue from a cardiology standpoint? Yes? Yeah, so the process is to go in with the probe. If they find that there's a blockage, that's when they will place this in. So between these two procedures, in the U.S. alone, on an annual basis, you're looking at $5 billion spent here. So there's a lot of money spent, and as I'm going to take you through in a few minutes, there is more money being spent on these procedures than really need to be. So I think this is some really interesting data that was published in the New England Journal a couple of years ago. And it took a look at nearly 400,000 patients who went in for an elective angiography. And it found that of those 400,000 patients, only 38% of patients actually had obstructive coronary artery disease. So 62% of patients are undergoing this invasive procedure, invasive, expensive, time-consuming procedure, and they didn't have coronary artery disease. And I think what's perhaps more concerning is that 84% of these patients had at least one non-invasive diagnostic test done previously. And so what that demonstrates is that these earlier non-invasive tests are not really doing the job that they are trying to of identifying, yes, this is a patient likely with coronary artery disease, or no, it's not. So the MPI, or that nuclear stress test that I talked about, as I mentioned, is associated with radiation to take a look at the blood flow. So these are done on the order of about 10 million per year, so they are a very frequent procedure. But there was a study published a couple years ago in JAMA that took a look at the aggregate radiation exposure from all different types of medical imaging. And what it found were two real eye-openers, I would say. One is that over a 20-year period, 40% of the patients that were undergoing an MPI were undergoing more than one MPI over the course of 20 years. And so this is the proverbial, to get one test is not to get one, it's often to get multiple. And it took a look at that subset of patients who were getting multiple MPIs and found that the cumulative effective radiation dose was greater than those who survived the Japanese atomic bomb. So we are not talking about a benign procedure by any means. Now this is over a 20-year period, to be clear. So I'm not telling you that if you go in for a single MPI, you're going to get more radiation than you would at Hiroshima. That's not my point. But what I am saying is that because these procedures are not infrequently done year over year in patients, the incremental radiation exposure is really something that folks need to pay attention to. And as a woman, I tend to put sort of radiation in the scheme of, well, how does that relate to a mammogram? That's something I know I got to sign up for, and it's got some level of radiation. I know I have to do that every year. So how does an MPI compare? And so a single MPI has equivalent radiation to 39 nanograms. So these can be very helpful procedures, full stop. So let me be clear. However, they are being done more frequently than they need to be done, and they are by no means benign procedures. So that's a bit about the safety implications of MPI, but I think then you also have to think about, well, if they are really effective, then we might be willing to trade off some of the safety. This is some data that was pulled from the PREDICT trial, which was the first trial in which we used our CORUS CAD test. And the subset here are patients who had obstructive coronary artery disease. So they went all the way to angiography and were found that, in fact, they did have obstructive coronary artery disease. Women are a particularly challenging subset of patients to diagnose with coronary artery disease. They're challenging particularly because the symptoms in women are quite different than they do in men. Men often have sort of what's referred to as the Hollywood heart attack, that sort of crushing chest pain and shortness of breath, the symptoms that you generally hear about pretty frequently. Women's symptoms are much more diffuse, and as a mom, I can say, you know, I suffer from many of those on a daily basis. There are things like fatigue and heartburn and gastrointestinal issues and headaches. And, you know, you go, okay, really? Could that be coronary artery disease? So it's really difficult to tease out what, in fact, are symptoms of coronary artery disease and not symptoms of, I ate something really bad the other night, or I'm working too hard. So that's sort of the backdrop, that women are difficult to diagnose with coronary artery disease anyway. And when you take a look at the utility of the current approaches that diagnose coronary artery disease, you can find that they are doing an even worse job in women than they are in men. So again, this is the subset of patients who had obstructive coronary artery disease, and you can see in the red bars only 20% of women who had coronary artery disease had a positive MPI. At least as concerning, though, is that 25% of them who had coronary artery disease